Today, the Army announcing that it will, in fact, pursue charges against Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. We're now joined by Brian Bouffard, an expert in military justice, because he's been a lawyer in the military system and in the civil system. If you ever need to talk to someone who really knows what he's talking about, it's jagdefender.com. Brian, great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this case all along, and finally the charges are out there. Well, first of all, let's hear. This is Army Colonel Daniel King announcing what the charges are.
Sergeant Bergdahl is charged with 1 count, desertion with intent to shirk important or hazardous duty, and 1 count, misbehavior before the enemy by endangering the safety of a command, unit, or place.
Okay. Is one more serious than the other then? Or?
Well, it's interesting, and we were all speculating for so many months on this case, and now, here we are with United States versus Sergeant Bergdahl, and they've done what we all kind of suspected they would do, and that's charge him with desertion. Mm-hmm. But what they've also done is they've charged him under kind of a catch-all article, and what I'm talking about there is Article 99, misbehavior before the enemy, and there are a number of different ways that a person can violate that article. And one of them is exactly what the Colonel just told you, which is if someone through disobedience, neglect, or intentional misconduct endangers the safety of any command, unit, place, or military property, and if you are before or in the presence of the enemy, then you can be charged under that statute. And the way they've charged it is a little bit interesting to me, because at this point, there's an argument to be made that the death penalty is authorized for this, but they're announcing that they're considering it to be a life sentence maximum, and that tells me that they've already made the decision not to refer it capital.
So the misbehavior before the enemy, that was the behavior that he exhibited after he deserted?
Well, and that's another good question, because the government has to prove certain specific things depending on how they charge that particular article. So they're going to have to explain and prove beyond a reasonable doubt exactly how it was that he did endanger the safety of what I presume would be the forward operating base.
We've got the 6 soldiers that died searching for him. Is that going to be the point?
Well, I don't think so, because that's not necessarily a command unit or place. But as I'm sitting here thinking through it, they could probably make that argument that, again, as we've talked about before, when Sergeant Bergdahl left, he knew that he was likely to be, looked for, and that could present serious danger to other people, and certainly it did. What I think, though, that they're focused on is the fact that he has intelligence or gave intelligence about the weaknesses, the physical weaknesses at that location, the forward operating base from which he left.
Do you think if those deaths of the soldiers that were searching for him, if that had not occurred, do you think we'd see charges against him?
Any charges, or just the Article 99?
Do you think we'd actually see the Army charge him, considering he was a prisoner of war there for 5 years? Do you think without the deaths that we'd still see charges?
In my opinion, yes. I think we still would. And I do believe, and I think the Army has even come out and said, either through an announcement or through back channels, that there really appears to be no push for him to serve anything close to a life sentence. They're certainly aware that he did spend 5 years in captivity, and all those issues are going to be hashed out in a sentencing case if this case gets that far.
If you're his lawyer, do you want to proceed to a trial? How would you be handling this right now?
My personal opinion right now, knowing, at least what I know right now, which is mostly from media reports, of course, I don't think this case will see a trial. There are so many off-ramps from between here and a trial, the road to that trial. There are so many off-ramps to deal with this case in a way that doesn't require him standing up in front of a jury and a judge and facing an actual
You're talking
trial
about a plea deal? Is that the off-ramp? Of just
well, some kind of plea deal, perhaps some kind of dismissal in lieu of a trial, in other words, an administrative separation from the Army. It's sad to say, and I don't necessarily want to impugn anybody's character on this, but I do think that one of the significant things that the government is probably concerned about is all the money that they have to pay Sergeant Bergdahl had he not committed misconduct. If you work out a plea deal, or certainly if he got convicted, the government would not owe him all that money. So that's another thing that is probably playing around here. Is
there any effect from the fact that we let go these 5 Taliban prisoners, right? I mean, these guys were pretty hardcore folks, and we let them go to get him back, who's now a deserter. Is that going to affect how the Army proceeds with the case?
I don't believe it will. That is an issue that is much more important in the court of public opinion than it would be in a court-martial.
Okay, so is there any personal? I mean, because you've dealt with these cases, when you've got the Army going up against a guy like him, who they consider a deserter, they probably some blame him for the deaths of the guys that went looking for him. Does that change the dynamics of the legal dynamics of dealing with the case?
In my opinion, it doesn't change the legal dynamics all that much. Now, it certainly affects attitudes of witnesses against him, certainly attitudes of court members. That's the military term for jurors. All of that's going to be bouncing around in everyone's minds, and so it's going to have maybe an informal effect on things, but there's no formal effect that would have on the sport.
Okay, so you wouldn't want him in front of fellow soldiers, I'm guessing, in a trial situation.
Well, that's the way the system is set up, and there's all kinds of heinous crimes out there that you sometimes maybe think twice about. Wow, do I want to put this in front of a jury? And depending on how his lawyer evaluates the evidence that the government has of what they believe Sergeant Bergdahl did, he's going to make those decisions. But
the government could avoid a plea deal, right? They could say, look, we're not going to accept anything other than life in prison. If you don't like that, we're going to trial, right?
Absolutely. The government can always do that in any case. And in fact, the defense could do that in any case. The defense can force the government to dismiss a case or try it just by saying, I'm not going to accept a deal.
And why would the government compromise here?
Well, again, I think one of the real significant factors in this is the fact that he has already been, on a very real level, punished pretty severely by 5 years of captivity in the hands of a pretty brutal enemy. So that's going to weigh into all of the factors when people are making the decisions of, do we want to offer a plea deal? What kind of a plea deal do we want to offer? Those questions.
No question. I mean, you can't even imagine what that would be like, 5 years being held by the Taliban. Brian Bouffard, a lawyer, an expert in these cases and civil cases also. If you need some good advice, it's jagdefender.com, jagdefender.com. Brian, thank you so much.
Mike, thank you so much. Take care.